They say old age hides you quietly, but it also shows you loneliness in its rawest form. In this house, silence surrounded me like a weight, pressing against my shoulders, my chest, my very presence. It was then I realized that some places are full long before you even arrive. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. I held my 2 worn bags tightly, the leather handles scuffed and familiar under my fingers. The hallway stretched before me, polished wood gleaming faintly in the morning light. Each step I took made the floor groan quietly, as if reminding me I was an intruder. Shelves were stacked with objects I did not know. Porcelain figurines, glossy books, photographs of faces I could not place. Even the smell of lemon polish and faint traces of dinner lingered in the air like a warning. This was a home that belonged to others. I set my bags down gently, letting the small thud remind me that I had just arrived, and yet the house seemed to already know I was not welcome. I hung my coat carefully, the weight of it nothing compared to the heaviness settling in my chest. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt the mattress dip beneath me, a small comfort that felt strange, alien, almost mocking. The silence in the house was absolute. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator, distant and indifferent, punctuated the stillness. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining my husband's voice from a distant memory, telling me it would be all right. But comfort does not travel well through absence. Dinner came quietly. My son spoke with ease, his voice warm and effortless, filling the air, leaving none for me. Ariba moved around the kitchen with efficiency, eyes never meeting mine. My tea was placed on the counter, separate from the table, a subtle reminder of my position. I smiled at myself in the reflection of the window, forcing warmth where there was none. Perhaps tomorrow would be different. But the house had already made its choice. I was a guest, not a resident. Morning brought no relief. The dining table held only 4 chairs for 5 people. My tea sat alone on the counter, steam curling upwards like a small beacon in a world where I was invisible. I tried to focus on the warmth in my hands, but even that small comfort seemed unreachable. To sit down in this house felt like permission, not a right. Ariba closed the kitchen door while preparing breakfast, enclosing herself in a private world that did not include me. Through frosted glass, I caught fragments of laughter, snippets of conversation, and stopped words that never reached my ears. The sunlight streamed in, bright and cheerful, yet I felt unseen, unwanted. How can a room full of people feel emptier than an empty one? My birthday passed quietly. Only my grandson remembered, leaving a small, bright drawing on the counter. I held it gently in my hands, the rough texture of the paper pressing into my fingers, as though it were the only piece of the world that still knew I existed. Online, social media displayed a family lunch I was not invited to. That night, the ticking clock sounded louder than any voice. How can a home forget the person living inside it? Late at night, I heard voices, my son and Ariba, arguing softly. My name was mentioned once, a whisper in the darkness, then silence. The next morning, life continued as though nothing had happened. I folded laundry alone, smoothing each crease carefully, as if the motion could repair the invisible cracks in my life. Can silence protect, or does it only reveal what everyone already knows? I noticed the cupboard had been locked, and the house keys changed without my knowledge. My belongings, still in just 2 small bags, remained untouched on the shelf. Evening walks became my only escape. My grandson noticed my quiet, sensing the distance, but the adults ignored it. How can a house be so full yet leave someone so empty? The next morning I tried to be careful, painfully so. Even lifting a teacup felt like walking on fragile ice. My hands trembled slightly, not from weakness alone, but from the constant awareness of being watched, of being judged by the unspoken rules of this polished house. I reached for a mug, porcelain smooth beneath my fingers, when a small tremor betrayed me. The cup slipped, hitting the tile floor and shattering with a sound that seemed to echo too loudly, filling every corner. Silence followed. I froze, heart racing, listening to the faint ringing in my ears. Ariba appeared, calm, collecting the pieces. She did not look at me. Her hands moved over the shards with practiced efficiency, replacing them silently in the cabinet. My chest ached, the small mistake carrying a weight far heavier than the broken porcelain. I knelt, picking up the fragments carefully, pressing them into a bag. Each sweep of the cloth felt like an attempt to repair something much larger, something I had long suspected, the fragile space I occupied in this home. I scrubbed the counters, polished the floor, washed dishes, each motion deliberate, almost ritualistic. The sunlight fell across the kitchen, catching dust particles and making them sparkle like tiny stars in the otherwise dim room. I imagined that if I worked hard enough, moved carefully enough, maybe the house would notice me. Maybe it would whisper back, "You belong here." But the air remained still. The house was indifferent, polished, alive, and yet untouched by my presence. My grandson noticed me quietly. He did not speak, only observed, his small eyes reflecting understanding and concern. The adults, absorbed in their routines, seemed blind to my efforts. I realized I had become invisible, an extra shadow in the corners of a home that had already determined I was unnecessary. Later, I walked through the hallway slowly, noticing things I had overlooked before. The way the curtains fell slightly unevenly, faint scuff marks on the polished floor, the half-open drawers in the kitchen, the lingering aroma of coffee. Each small detail whispered a story of life moving without me, of laughter and conversation that never included my presence. I pressed my palm against the smooth wood of the banister, feeling the warmth of sunlight there, trying to anchor myself in a space that refused to anchor me. Evening came with a soft chill. I wrapped my shawl tightly around my shoulders, the worn threads comforting against my skin. I walked outside, letting my feet trace familiar paths across the yard. My grandson walked silently beside me, his small hand brushing against mine. No words passed between us, but I felt tethered to something real, something unbroken. Here, in this quiet outside, I was noticed. Here, my presence mattered without permission. Inside, the house continued its indifferent hum. I returned to my room, footsteps muffled by carpet, to find my bags untouched, stacked neatly on the shelf. I sat on the bed, tracing the seams of my coat with my fingers, feeling the weight of small exclusions pressing into me. Tea on the counter, cupboard locked, conversations paused, each one a reminder of the distance between me and the rest of this household. I thought of my husband, of homes that had known me fully, of kitchens and chairs and tables that held my presence as naturally as air. This house was bright, clean, full, yet it held no room for me. I wondered, quietly, if this is what old age truly meant, to be seen but not included, present yet unnoticed, cared for in small ways but never truly welcomed. Night fell. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my grandson's drawing, the colors glowing softly under the lamp. I traced the lines, imagining his laughter, imagining a home that recognized me. But here, in polished light and quiet hallways, I felt the absence more than ever. The house had already moved on without me, and I had to find my place elsewhere, even if only in my own memories, my own reflections, my own quiet walks outside. Days blended into one another, each passing quietly yet heavy with small unspoken reminders that I did not belong. I moved through the house like a shadow, noticing details that no one else seemed to register. The way Ariba's eyes flicked toward me, then away, the faint pause in my son's laughter when I entered a room, the soft click of doors closing slightly too quickly. Each motion was subtle, yet they cut deeper than any words could. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I discovered my cupboard had been locked. The keys had been changed without telling me. My hands lingered on the cold handle, the smooth wood beneath my fingers, and I felt the weight of exclusion settle in my chest. I stood there quietly, wondering, is it worse to be excluded or to know that no one even expects you to notice? My 2 small bags remained untouched on the shelf, a silent testament to the space I was never meant to occupy. Evenings became my refuge. I would walk slowly around the yard, my shawl wrapped around me, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. The air smelled faintly of earth and damp grass, and the faint sound of cars passing on the nearby road reminded me of a world outside that had space for me. My grandson followed me quietly, holding my hand sometimes, letting me lean on him without words. In him, I felt seen. In him, I felt belonging. Inside, the house carried on indifferent. One day, I accidentally dropped Ariba's favorite mug again. The crash echoed, sharper than I expected. Silence fell, heavy, and Ariba replaced it wordlessly. I knelt, cleaning every shard, polishing every counter, as though my effort could somehow fix not just the mug, but the fragile threads of my place in this home. But no acknowledgement came. The house remained unyielding, polished, and distant. I found myself observing small patterns more intently. Conversations halted when I entered. Laughter skipped over me. Eyes met mine briefly, then drifted away. Even the sunlight seemed to fall in places I could not reach, highlighting my absence. And yet, in the quiet corners, I existed. Folding laundry, preparing meals, walking slowly in the evening. My presence was silent, but I was present nonetheless. One morning, I began packing my clothes into the suitcase without thinking. The action felt automatic, a quiet acknowledgement of what my heart already knew. My grandson watched me silently, understanding in a way the adults refused to. The room felt colder than when I had first arrived. Leaving was not a decision born of anger. It was a quiet recognition of reality. This home had never had space for me. I continued with my routines, preparing breakfast for the family, setting a 5th chair without explanation. The family sat, eating in uneasy silence. My son's gaze lingered on me differently, a flicker of recognition dawning too late. No one spoke. The act was mine alone, a quiet assertion that I existed, even if the house refused to acknowledge it. Evenings were spent under the soft glow of the streetlights outside. I would sit on the steps, listening to the distant hum of life beyond these walls. The breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from a nearby garden. I felt a sense of liberation in the quiet, as though space itself could grant me acknowledgement where people could not. My grandson would sometimes sit beside me, drawing quietly, sharing his world without words. In these moments, I remembered what it meant to be seen, fully, without expectation. The subtle tension inside the house contrasted sharply with the openness outside. Inside, I was invisible. Outside, I existed freely. Each step, each breath, each turn of the path became a quiet rebellion, a reclaiming of a space that had never been offered to me. I realized that belonging is not something given. It is something quietly taken, sometimes in stolen moments under the trees, in the warmth of a child's small hand, in the stillness of evening walks. The house felt colder now. Even the sunlight that had once streamed through the windows seemed to pause before reaching me, hesitant, unwilling. I realized, slowly, painfully, that this space would never be mine. Every locked cupboard, every changed key, every quiet exclusion spoke the same truth. I was not expected, not included, not truly seen. One morning, I moved through the kitchen carefully, arranging breakfast for everyone. I placed a fifth chair at the table without a word. My hands shook slightly as I poured tea, setting out bread and fruit. My son glanced at me, hesitation flickering across his features. The recognition was delayed, muted, as though only now had he begun to notice the absence I had carried silently for weeks. The cupboard remained locked, my belongings untouched. Each small act of preparation, arranging silverware, folding napkins, adjusting placemats, became my quiet protest. If I could not belong fully, I could still exist deliberately, mark my presence in ways too subtle for anyone else to see. The house hummed around me, indifferent, polished, bright, but I pressed on, performing the rituals of care as if care itself could carve space for me. Later, I stood near the window, watching my grandson play outside. He looked up and smiled, a small gesture, yet it held more warmth than the entire household combined. I thought of the times I'd been ignored, the dinners passed in silence, the soft exclusion of my birthday. Each memory weighed heavily, yet seeing him freed something quiet inside me. It was a gentle affirmation. I mattered somewhere. I was not erased. The day progressed, filled with small gestures of invisible labor. I folded laundry, swept the floors, wiped the counters. Every act was deliberate, each movement a quiet claim on a space that had never been offered. I realized that care could be a language, one that spoke even when others refused to hear. And in my acts, I began to reclaim something essential. Not permission, not recognition, but dignity. Evening approached. I prepared my bags slowly, methodically, packing clothes and small belongings, placing the drawing from my grandson carefully inside. The act was quiet, almost imperceptible. The adults carried on as usual, unaware or perhaps unwilling to see the shift. My departure was not dramatic. It did not need to be. It was quiet, deliberate, a reclaiming of self in a space that had never been mine. I placed the fifth chair back in its original place, adjusting it slightly, a final gesture of presence without demand. Breakfast had been eaten in uneasy silence. My son's eyes lingered a moment too long, realization dawning quietly, but the moment passed. No one spoke. The house remained unchanged, polished and indifferent, but I felt a small victory in the acknowledgement of absence. At night, I sat under the tree in the yard, the cool breeze wrapping around me like a soft blanket. The leaves whispered softly, carrying the faint scent of earth and freedom. I breathed deeply, feeling for the first time in months that I could exist fully without asking permission. The house behind me would remain bright, clean and indifferent, but it no longer held sway over my heart. In the quiet, I realized that belonging is not given, it is claimed. Sometimes silently, sometimes simply by leaving. I glanced at my grandson, who had quietly placed his small hand in mine. His eyes held understanding, compassion, a quiet bridge between exclusion and love. In that moment, I understood that home is not a structure of walls or floors, but of connection, recognition, and the subtle acknowledgement of presence. The house had never offered me that. outside, beneath the tree, I finally felt it. The morning air was crisp, carrying a faint hint of dew and earth. I adjusted my shawl around my shoulders, the familiar weight of it comforting against the tremor in my hands. My bags were packed neatly, the small drawing from my grandson tucked carefully inside. I moved through the house one last time, each step measured, deliberate, as if committing the space to memory before leaving it behind. I paused in the hallway, noticing the polished floors, the bright sunlight on the shelves, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Each detail seemed sharper now, clearer. Every object reminding me of the distance I had felt. The silent exclusions, the untouched cupboards, the tea left on the counter. My heart ached slightly, not with anger, but with the quiet sorrow of realizing that I had never truly belonged here. The fifth chair remained in its place, set without explanation, a subtle claim of presence. I had poured tea, arranged breakfast, folded laundry, cleaned, polished, observed, and endured. Each act had been a quiet protest, a way of existing in a space that refused to acknowledge me. Yet now, standing in the hallway, I felt a sense of release. I did not need permission to leave. I did not need recognition to step into the world that awaited me beyond these walls. My grandson appeared beside me, small hand reaching for mine. He had watched me quietly, understanding without words, bearing witness to what the adults had not. I smiled softly, fingers brushing his, a silent gratitude for the small bridge he had offered me between exclusion and love. No one else spoke, no one else noticed. It did not matter. Presence is sometimes most profound when it is silent, when it does not demand acknowledgement. I walked slowly toward the door, the polished floor cool beneath my feet. The soft click of the lock behind me was not an ending, but a punctuation, a subtle signal that I was stepping into my own space, my own world. Thank you for watching. Your time and support truly mean a lot. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you even better videos. Stay inspired, stay focused, and I'll see you in the next video.